to America. Then my mother's side, they were actually founders, pioneers in Arizona. They pioneered Prescott, Arizona, and things. So I had a little bit of time there, but I think it really influenced my body because I love the desert and everything else. So we grew up in California. This is back in, I was born in 1948, so somebody similar age, science was king. Actually, somebody reminded me that when we were growing up, whenever I was in high school, there was a big lamentation for old people because science was just about to discover immortality at that time. And these old people who were going to die, they were just missing out like that. The rest of us were going to become immortal. And it's actually people were thinking like that. And I remember that. It was a fact. So anyway, it didn't quite work out that way. So then I went to University of California, and mostly I was at Davis campus. Okay. And started electrical engineering, but I understood very quickly where that was heading, and very mechanistic. Okay. So I changed to biological engineering. I was doing surgery on dogs, cats. They all lived. Okay, the same thing was the same mechanistic model. Krebs free energy cycle was all the body is a machine. So then I changed to psychology, and almost the same model. The model of the psyche was the Britannica. It says that originally the word psyche means the self. But then in the 17th century it became a formative for the mind. In the 20th century it became to mean the brain, like that. There's this joke. Psychology is the study of college sophomores and white rats. All the experiments. So anyway, I also then, and so then I came in contact with the humanists, like Fritz Perls, Maslow, and some people like that who actually believed that people were real, which was actually a big phenomenon because everybody else believed Pavlovian responses and Skinner and all these kind of very mechanistic ideas of psychology, the mind. And so it was actually, they were the highest contact. Of course, I was in Davis, so Charles Tarp was there, and doing his experiments. And by then I had to graduate. The force of nature was pushing me on. So I graduated with Phi Beta Kappa. I got the first place prize in psychology. And then Northwestern, and by then I was very suspicious of all Western knowledge. I'd been through the physical sciences, the life sciences, and psychology and humanities. But by then, the thing that actually interested me was Viola Spolin. You know her? Improvisation for the theater. So her son, Paul Sills, is in the Britannica. And they started this whole thing of improvisation theater games, which was manifested in Chicago as the second city, in New York as the open stage, and Los Angeles as the committee. And it was improvisational theater, which is a whole different view. So her classic book is called Improvisation for the Theater, and it's a very valuable book to get. The first part, she expresses her philosophy of what is theater, what's happening, what is education, and all these things. And it's very traditional. It comes back through before her from Konstantin Stanislavski, and it goes on in the modern world, and people like Peter Brook, who was very modern, dramas with Shakespeare and like that communication. So that was actually the highest, most advanced thing I found at that time, because by games, the idea was in their community was that we have an intellectual nature, we have a sensuous nature. We can see things, we can hear things, we can smell things. Okay, but beyond that, we have this intellectual ability to use grammar, use algebra, form intellectual concepts, constructs to put that sensuous experience in perspective. Science is characterized often as rational empiricism, right? Rational empiricism. You see things, you think about it, that's the result. So, but she was talking about the intuition, right? The intuitive aspect, where at one moment you get these whole integrated concepts and things like that. And so the theater, the whole aim of theater was to find a mechanism by which this can be stimulated, it can be developed. And so the technique they were using was games, which came from this whole tradition of Viola Spolin, teacher, back to the Hall houses in Chicago, and back to Constantine Stanislavski and everything else. Really old like that. It was a very wonderful technique, very interesting. That's why I went to Northwestern, because she was teaching there. And I was going to integrate social psychology and theater games. But then she left and came back to the Esalen Institute in California. So there I was, trying to figure out what to do. And at that point I came in contact with Donald Campbell, as mentioned, who was president of the American Psychological Association. So I still remember I was in his office complaining about all this. I'd gone through all the Western knowledge like this and that, and now I've come to psychology, and psychology is really highly biased into the same mechanistic model and this and that. And so he was kind of looking at me like, playing spider on the mirror type in his hands, like, And so I said all this, and he said, "You win." He said, "You figured it out." He said, "This whole thing is for making money." And if you don't want to make money, if you actually want to discover what is truth, then probably you should get out of the system. Otherwise, he said, basically would be, by the time you're 55 years old, you'd be allowed to do original research. The whole thing like that. So that was the impetus, and then I came and I tried different things. I was kind of sort of frightening to give up, the future of no money. So it was sometime with the improvisational theater program in Chicago, the second city, learned a lot. And like the biography says, headed east, and got a black belt in Okinawan karate, which I learned a lot about prana, and how the energy moves in the body, and what we see is like second or third class compared to what we feel, and there's so many things, which in the West would be magic. These people can do things that you can't explain unless you have a more superior model of nature. Okay. So then we went ahead and finally I came in contact with this tradition, Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, A.C.Bhakti Swami, who was marketing it like anything in the 1960s and very successful like that and so on. But it also has a very, very deep philosophical tradition, like that, beyond being something which is very practical and be attractive as yoga, and anything like that. Which he did. You got to get it out, make it popular. Get the books out, and then people who can read later on, they'll catch on. So specifically our tradition, in terms of philosophical perspective, of course, is an Oriental tradition. And within it, how many people are familiar with Indian philosophy? Okay, all right. Okay. So you know that in the Encyclopedia Britannica, only one country doesn't mention the philosophy of that country. It talks about, the geography, the history, so many things in different countries. But the only country where it mentions the philosophy of a country is India. And it's not even a part of the entry under India. It's this whole separate topic, philosophy of India. Right? So, if you want good food, you can take birth in Italy. If you want romance, take it France. If you want good machines, if you want espionage, US. England. British or even still. Yeah. Innovation, America. But philosophy, India is a land of philosophy. So many traditions, everything else like that. It's so very vast. And so many things. It's where it starts. So Sad Darshan, the 6 traditional schools of philosophy, but those are actually kind of modern, that analysis like that. So Western views of Indian history. So if we're taking from our point of view, that when God creates what do you call it in Spanish, manicomia, when God creates the madhouse, where we all are now, right? Yeah. If you look at Paradise Lost, okay, the devil, left paradise, came down there, is in pandemonium in hell. And they realized all they have to do is apologize. Hey, we had a bad day, but let's go back to heaven. Hell is a very unpleasant place. The ground's always hot. It smells bad. Okay, all we have to do is say, hey, we're sorry, forgive us. And God let us go back. So the devil comes up with a statement, which, Jack London used it. if you want to make a lot of money, right, from this thing, you can make a bumper sticker out of this and you'll become very rich, you know. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, right? And that's kind of like a very common, you know, like Frank Sinatra, I did it my way. Okay, so there it is. You know. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Okay, that was the devil's conclusion. Okay. So starting with that same hypothesis, the idea from the Vedic tradition, which is the literature we're talking about, like that. You know, I would say from Western scholarship, the Vedas themselves form an enigma. There's one invasion theory that everything came from someplace now in Mesopotamia or something like that, and the Aryans invaded India. But actually, it's not getting much more impetus from scholars. It's kind of a looks like, you know, it was an arrogant European idea. Because when they came to India, they found grammatical things the same. They found words the same. They found so many things the same that it's surprising. There must have been something in common here. Now, of course, the British, according to our point of view, didn't want to have Indians as their ancestors. So the idea was there was an invasion. You know, came from someplace outside of India, the Aryan invasion, and gradually went to the south. But so much evidence that it never happened. The indigenous culture was there. This is where it started at that. You know, this Genesis argument. But many modern scholars, there's almost no more impetus going into establishing the Aryan invasion. But because it's a big idea, it takes a while for the elephant to change the direction. But so much evidence that there always was an indigenous culture there, very profound. The architectural tradition is called Vastu. Like that, you know. One book called Vastu, the Origin of Feng Shui, like that. And it involves these things about where the sun is located, all these subtle elements and different reactions, and how these can elevate your consciousness or make it more gross, like that. So, in Mahindradara and Harappa, some of the oldest archaeological sites found on the original pathway of the Indus River, 2000 BC or 1000 BC, something like that. They're using exactly the same techniques of architecture that are described in the Vastu Shastras 2,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, like that. How to organize things, the locations, very systematic, sophisticated sewer systems, everything. So the idea is that this culture goes back a long way. It's not something which has been evolving and so many things like that. That's a perspective. And so from the internal perspective of our tradition, which is common to many other traditions, that God, the original person, Purusha, everybody's in heaven with him having a good time. It's all a cooperation and things are just getting better all the time. But somehow or other we develop this individualistic, ego, separate idea. Okay, so there has to be a place for this. So that's the material world. The mental hospital, the insane asylum, whatever. And you go there and get rectified. So that's the perspective on where we are now. So when God creates this external world, this way is, he also gives a manual for how you're supposed to live here, how you're supposed to reform yourself, how the whole thing works. And that's called Veda, like that. It can be variously interpreted, but generally it means knowledge, the word Veda, the Sanskrit word. So then, coming down into the modern world, actual history, you find so many groups which are following the Vedas, like that, in different branches of philosophy, accepting them like that, and interpreting them in different ways. And there are subsequent people who write, commentaries and things like that, which 5,000 years old, 2,000 years old, 1,000 years old, 500 years old. So many great things like that. Of course, the basic language of the Vedas is Sanskrit. It's like Socrates, for mentioning, of course, Latin, Greek, and Greek. So the basic language, classical language of the Vedas is Sanskrit. And Professor either Gary Hart or George Hart, is he here today? I'm here, okay. Anyway, I think it's George Hart. But he's from the University of California, Berkeley, and he wrote a book called A Rapid Sanskrit Method, like that. how to learn Sanskrit, rapidly, more or less. In the introduction, he said, well, why would anybody want to learn Sanskrit? And he says, because, like Arabic, Chinese languages, Greek, Latin, it's been the carrier of culture for a long time. So therefore, the writing, the culture, is so vast. It allows you to enter into such a great culture of literature. And he goes on, law, architecture, medicine, physical sciences, political sciences, unlimited literature. There's a book, Catalogus, which is a bibliography of all known ancient Sanskrit texts. And most big research, probably Stanford has a copy, most big research libraries have a copy. And it includes, it's a bibliography of all ancient Sanskrit texts available on the planet. A book on mathematics in the Maharaja of Mysore's library, and it gives some description of, where they are located, people are updating it. So when it was last published, it included over 160,000 ancient texts like that in Sanskrit. So, and he says some of these systems of mathematics would have taken an entire lifetime for a Western to master one system. Such developed things, music, art, dance, political sciences, everything. And he says, without a doubt, Panini is the greatest pre-modern grammarian. The Mahabharata ranks with the Iliad and Odyssey. The plays of Shakuntala by Kalidas, one of the greatest poets who ever lived. Then he says, and in my opinion, with the exception of a few other Indian works, the Bhagavad Purana, Srimad Bhagavatam, is the greatest work of devotion ever composed. Like that, So it's 18,000 verses. It's composed of 12 cantos with maybe 30, each canto has, how many chapters? Quite a few. Maybe 55, 10. Maybe 30 chapters per canto. And what he has over here in this display, like little soldiers here. On the left is the yellow, is the Bhagavad Gita, right? Which is like part of the Mahabharata, which is very basic, very simple, very readable, like that. And the Bhagavad Gita, of course, is probably the most translated, the most famous of all Indian philosophical texts. But we consider ABC. Krishna is just establishing that what is this material world? He explains what is this world. He explains how the soul is different than the body, and the soul has a relationship with the super soul, the Holy Spirit, and it has to reintegrate that. That's all he says. Then on the other side, on the right-hand side, he has the Krishna book, which is the 10th canto, the very most advanced part of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So basically it's like ABC, XYZ. If you want to get the DEF, HIJK, LMNOP, before you go to the... But the Krishna book is presenting a monotheistic, esoteric, emotional love of God in conjugal humor. Right? Like that. What Mother Mary felt like when she received Jesus Christ into her womb. Okay, back to ABC. But this is not unknown to our Western tradition. It's universal. We're talking about a universal science, right? Theology. So Saint Bernard de Clairvaux. How many people know him? Okay, one person. Anybody else? Two. Okay. San Bernardino de Clairvaux. He is a very nice person. Yeah. For example, he has a commentary on the Song of Solomon. The song. How many people know the Song of Solomon in the Bible, right? The Song of Solomon. Like that. Yeah. So, but it's very esoteric. It starts off, kiss me with the kiss of your lips. Okay, that's where we're starting. So then Saint Bernard, he says, hey, I'm only going to talk to you monks about these things, these very confidential relationships with God, because I think you're free from the passions of the body and the passions of the mind for honor and respect by studying Ecclesiastes and by studying Proverbs. So I think now you're ready for these things. You want this, like Socrates, the philosopher is finished with this world. He wants to minimize the things in this world. And also the prestige, honor, fame. And Socrates was going around eschewing all honor, all fame, doing anything that would promote that. You know. Okay, so then we're talking about the actual life of the soul, right? These things. Yeah. So he gives his commentary on the Song of Solomon. And he says, yes, you can kiss the lips of God. It's a very intimate relationship. It's talking about something superhuman. But he said, before that, let's talk about the kiss of the feet and the kiss of the hand. Okay. Like, you have a master, he takes care of you, he's a good person, but then somehow or other you debauch his wife, you run off with his money, you cause so many problems and everything. And you're just about to be killed by 6 people for what you've done in their community, and your master breaks in, gets half his nose cut off, saves your life, pulls you out. What do? You kiss his feet. You say, God, thank you, sir. Thank you. Forgive me. Forgive me. He said this is the first kiss. In the Sanskrit tradition, it's called sambandha. Where we just, I made a mistake. It's better to live in heaven than to reign in hell. I've decided this conclusion. Please forgive me, I made a mistake, I will click my heels together 3 times and go back, So sambandha. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has a big confusion. Arjuna is very confused about what is duty, what is right, what is wrong. It's very similar. A whole other lecture we have is Hamlet and Arjuna. It's very similar to the problem Hamlet's facing. So finally, he tells in the beginning, the 2nd chapter, I can't solve this. Sisyas teham sarimam tam tapanam. I'm your disciple. Please instruct me. I'm surrendered to you. Okay. So that's the Bhagavad Gita, the conclusion there. And that's sambandha. You accept the teacher. I'm not going to make any artificial arguments. Okay. Well, if I have honest arguments, I'll make them, but I won't come up with any excuses anymore. I'm really willing to listen now. Okay. So then, sambandha. And he says that's the beginning. Different traditions, different religions, different rituals, different formalities. But if you go on, you become purified, you do your work, you can control your senses and your mind, you become a qualified servant, like that. Now the master says, look, I have a very important message. It has to get to this place by 5 o'clock, and you take care of it for me. You kiss his hand and you say, yes, sir, I'll do that for you. You can count on me. So this is what we call abhideya, where one is taking up different responsibilities in spiritual life and things like that. But you haven't still come to the completely transcendental position beyond time and space of a celestial relationship in divinity like that. So he gives a very nice description. In terms of our tradition, you can match up the things as experiences and contrasts like that. So it's a very, very nice thing to read. It's available on the internet easily. What else? That's nice. And also, I started Teresa of Avila. And she has her thing. She describes the different levels as like a crystal palace. And reading her, she seems like a jolly older nun. Who's joking and stuff, but she has to be. She can straighten you out. Very nice reading of things. But again, the same processes, same development. And of course, these are all monotheistic traditions from the very beginning. They're starting with the idea that there's some kind of monotheistic idea involved. And my friend David Sherman, who's a scholar, he's describing that in the Greek tradition, there's the same idea of conjugal love of God. So Plato says this is the highest form of divinity, of appreciation of divinity, worshiping in a conjugal feeling of a lover and beloved, like that. And he says in Greece it was known as choros and chore, this cult. And Plato said, but don't discuss it in public; it'll become vulgar. Ordinary people would simply make something, gross out of this. But yeah, this is the conclusion. Then, when it went to Rome, it went to Rome, it became known as Hova and Hoventa. Then my university in South America, Ricardo Palma University, that's why I'm a professor there, with the visiting professor with the Institute for Oriental and Occidental Classical Studies. And our director Doctora Dora Basan Montenegro Devota. She has 4 PhDs, and she did her San Marcos is the oldest university in Peru. It's one of the 2 oldest universities in the whole Western world, San Marcos. So she became emeritus professor there when she presented her thesis, which was based upon this idea of conjugal love. She was attracted to this. So in South American literature, there's these beautiful motifs about, you know, a young cowherd boy or a pastor, a pastoral fellow, and they're there, you know, beautiful, very able to a very bucolic environment, and beautiful exchanges of love, very pure, nothing, no growth, so many sentiments and poetry and feelings and challenges and competitors. So she liked this very much. But then, let's see, the window's in there, okay. Get that, I got the sun closing up. Actually, what I can do is I will go forward. It's okay. Okay. We did. So then she began to do the research work about where these ideas came from, you know. And all the authors were saying we've developed this from earlier European authors. And they went back to different people discussing this very bucolic country scenes, and these beautiful feelings of love and different poetry. And so she's identifying these, and they say, I got this from this person. And finally it came back to the Greeks. And it was there. She found it also in the early Greek literatures. This pastor, the young cowherd boy, would play on his flute. And when he played on his flute, the calf was unable to suck the milk from their mother's nipples, which stand with tears frozen in their eyes. You know? But the same metaphors were passing in so many things. So she did a very good job, and she became an emeritus professor at San Marcos University, which is quite an accomplishment. It's, you know, one of the University of Mexico and San Marcos University got their what's it called, authorization from the king, charter. They became chartered the same year, 1502 or something. But the University of Mexico went into operation right away. The San Marcos waited 1 year. So the University of Mexico always claimed to be the oldest. We got the charter the same year, but we started before you did. So you're only 473 years old. We're 474. So it's a very, prestigious thing. Very good work. But that was all as far as she could go, and everybody told her it stops with the Greeks. That culture began with the Greeks. So she was sitting at a gas station with her husband in Lima, the guy filling up, and one of our Hare Krishna girls distributing books walked up with books from a Krishna book, and she said, oh, this is a 5,000-year-old book from India, and it talks about the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna, and this and that, and she read one phrase. And then our director, Dora Basan, said she was so shocked. You can imagine what this was for her. It was like, she couldn't move, The girl thought she didn't want the book, started to walk away. And she said she kind of forcibly moved her hand over to the horn and started pushing on the horn like that. The girl was looking at her, came back over, and she, I'll take it. But that's when she discovered the same motifs, the same metaphors, the same ideas like that, So that her thesis is that there's a continuous tradition all the way back to conjugal love of God, which manifests in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is called bridal mysticism. Bridal mysticism. And as far as I understand the Catholic tradition, they accept 6 people have achieved this level, of intensity. Of course, Mary, obviously. Santa Rosa of Lima, John of God, Teresa of Avila. And the writings are expressing this feeling, conjugal love of God like that. So anyway, that's the books on the table. ABC, we're not the body, there is reincarnation, and you can become integrated with reality. On the transcendental platform. Well, what is that reality? Once you come out of the cave, right? And Socrates said we're seeing all these things being projected for our benefit in the cave. And somebody says, hey, turn around. You turn around, you see these guys, manipulating all the machinery. And then you see, okay, there's God's in control of this world, he's in control of the madhouse. Why did all those people die of tsunamis? There is no God. You check back every single person, yeah, okay. Yeah, they got what they deserve. And it was good for them. It was a lesson like that, which you'll take to heart in your next lifetime. In your heart, you'll be attracted to things. You know? Okay, so then, but beyond that, outside of this world, outside of the cave, then what does Socrates describe? What happens when you come out of the cave? Huh?
The real world.
Not right away. Huh?
He talks about the sun and how the slave can't see the sun properly, and it hurts to see the sun.
In the beginning, this is too bright, it's just too much, and you realize, yeah, this is real light. But it's this, so you don't see form so much and stuff, you just see divinity and beauty and symmetry, and you're sick of all the false dualities and the false conclusions and the false priests. There's the light. Then you begin to become accustomed, because you have that nature. And you begin to see variety and forms, and people say, hello, where have you been? Oh, I've been in the cave. Oh, yeah. Don't look at the flower. I won't look at the flower. So it's the whole idea that the material world is like, is there a city prison in Palo Alto? Is there a city prison in Palo Alto? Probably not. Probably, there's someplace somewhere here. Yeah. See, you don't even know where it is, but I'm sure you all are convinced there probably is a place, like a prison, or a temporary place they lock people up, and who are not acting properly, need some help. Okay, you know. So that's the material world. From a spiritual point of view, it's one little aspect where people who are not quite in order need to go to get controlled until they get things straightened out. Things like that. These are called psychological help and vocational training. So then, you know, that's what's route. So that's the whole idea of the Bhagavad Purana, which he's mentioning, David Hart. 18,000 verses. And it starts with this very Bhagavad Gita. Actually, it starts after the Mahabharata. The Bhagavad Gita, ABCs. Then the Bhagavatam starts after that, with the conclusion that, yeah, there is transcendence, there is a divinity. And it goes through different levels like that. You know, discussing the divinity and relationships all the way through 12 cantos. To finally come to this point of, you know, of intensely personal relationships and conjugal love and the Krishna book. And it expects that you've already dealt with everything before this. Like that, like, again, like St. Bernard, I expect you've already become free from lust and vanity by studying Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. You know, it's just called prerequisite. Like that. Yeah. Brigham Young University. Most universities have electives and requirements, right? You know. So I saw this poster, and it shows this young girl doing that, and it says, "Purity is not an elective for graduating from Brigham Young University. It's a requirement." Yeah. So there are requirements. But A.C.Bhakti Swami, the founder of the Hare Krishna movement, in his tradition, he basically, the Krishna book has all these commentaries to straighten out these difficult points that you were supposed to have figured out, you know, in the previous 18,000 verses. So, what's in between? This is the first canto. And actually the first canto is 19 chapters, and this is only, 7 chapters, okay, like that. But it's a progressive study. It's a whole thing like that. It says as long as you're not free from what's the term? Fornication, okay, in the West. Illicit sexual relationships, adultery, these kind of things. You're just still entangled in these things. Okay, don't go beyond the first 2 cantos. The third canto starts to describe hell and all these kind of reactions and subtle levels of these reactions, and will go on like that. It's really, you know, heavy. You know. The Hindu hell is much worse than even the Christian hell or the Muslim hell. It's really, you know, hell. You know. You get dragged from your body, you know, by ropes, right? Then there's a road to hell where India's old women who've been exploited and tortured get their revenge on the road. Dogs with iron like teeth snap at you. You can barely go on. They whip you so much and put salt in your eyes to force you to go on. That's before you get to hell. That's the road to hell. Okay, so So don't go beyond the first 2 cantos. Yeah. But the other side, it also talks about celestial gratification. You know, celestial sexual gratification, which is not you know, if you die for Allah, you go to a place where there's 50 virgins and all, you know, all those things, and you know, the same things are described. Yeah, these are real worlds. They're subtle. You know, so many subtle existences are there. You know. To the fairies, okay, you know, we look like rats. Fairies, hadas, Spanish things, Nendaras, they live maybe about 6 or 7 times as long as we do, have 6 or 7 times the intelligence, actually more than that. And so our living places and everything else is to the gross level. They look like how rats carry on, sticking together, piled in, okay. You know, the real demigods, like the Lord of the Wind, the Lord of the Sun, the Mother Earth, they look like cockroaches, you know, to the level of intelligence and the level of subtle existence. To Brahma, who's considered the highest prisoner in the prison and the most trusted person, we look like atoms and molecules from his point of view. Western civilization comes and goes 2,000 times in every moment of his life. You know, talk about nano culture, we've already got it, you know, from Brahma's point of view. You know. So it's a whole cosmology, and the first 2 cantos describe this. And again, actually many things, the karate, that's my background, everybody, you got all these things, you got to put it together, right? We all got these experiences in different ways in life. So the karate actually gave me this experience of prana and these kind of things. But they had very good techniques, you know, but they didn't have a really good integrated theory of cosmology that allowed to explain why these things work. So the Bhagavatam was such an interesting thing to see how prana and these things all fit together like that in a sophisticated system. So to come back to the Phaedo, okay, why not? So with our institute, the North American Institute for Oriental and Classical Studies, a 501c3 nonprofit educational corporation incorporated in the state of Tennessee, on January 12th, 2004. I know that because it was my birthday, so January 12th, 2004. I wanted to die. I wanted to go, you know, go like Socrates, right? Socrates, they say, well, Socrates, you're going to die. He says, yeah. You're going to die. Yeah, I know. It's like, yeah, great opportunity. Well, why don't you just commit suicide? Well, because that's not permitted. We have the rules and regulations. But the opportunity is here. I can push it a little bit. The apology is actually where he argues, you know, in the case. And commentators say it's pretty much obvious from the beginning he has no real desire to win the thing. He's more like thinking, hey, you know, if I lose this, I can leave my body, and I can insult everybody, you know, now freely without any kind of anxiety. So let me just have a good time here. So the same thing, you know, it's the time of death, everything else, very crucial time. You know. But I was thinking the same thing. Maybe I can get out of this place in 2004. But no, January 12th was the only day we could do it. We incorporated NIOS. It was like God said, no, this is your body. You got to hang on to your place until 2014, like that. So we started it. And with that, we've been doing different projects with South America. More we can break into the universities at an intellectual level much easier. And North America also, developing things. So now we're starting this project, which is trying to do this dialogue, East-West dialogue, which has been our main focus of NIOS. And we would take it up to Phaedo as it seems like a good possibility, you know. Talking to many scholars from, you know, some of our advisors are from Harvard, some places all over the world like that, very good advisors, you know, whatever. And there's kind of this ambience that people are sick of being stupid. They've had enough the philosophy of Harry Potter and the Lord of the Rings, you know, it's just like common people want something a little more profound in life. We've kind of gone through this thing of just all the toys you can have and everything else and so on. No, let's get back to something, you know, without so much sugar in it. You know? And so where do we go? You know? at that. Well, religion is mixed up with a lot of things, which people have difficulty with, you know. And then, okay, then, so that's why we're finding great response, you know, I mentioned this topic because we're working a project now in South America, especially, but also North America too. People are like, yeah, let's time for another Renaissance. Let's go back and look at some of these things that were the basis of our processes. One description is that when Christ came along and had his cosmology, there wasn't the cosmology he actually came up with, adopted pretty much Christianity, was a Roman cosmology and everything else. So even in the Christian traditions, Solomon, Jesus, Muhammad, everybody, you know, they're all, you know, connected up very much with Greek mythology, Greek cosmology, Greek thought, Greek epistemology. So that makes an opportunity for people to go back and look at, you know, go back and where are we going? Maybe we got a little deviated with. So we're having a lot of good success, you know, with this project, and we hope that everybody, if you want to join us in investigating the traditional Western philosophy, psychology, perspective, epistemology, and also how it can take advantage of Oriental, you know, perspective like that. Even these Nobel laureates we work with, like Charles Towns, he said, I'm very interested in what you're doing, because that was actually the Bhaktivedanta Institute, which was focusing on science. Specifically at that time, the Congress we were organizing was called First World Congress for a Synthesis of Science and Religion. First World Congress for a Synthesis of Science and Religion. And he's one of the several Nobel laureates who participated, many people, you know, because, you know, the West has been predominated by science, and in India. It was in Bombay, the final meeting. But many publications also came together to make the book, you know. So he couldn't go to that one. He came to the second one, but the first one he wrote a very good article for it. And he said, I'm very much interested in the work you're doing. And I know many of my other friends, you know, very distinguished scientists, because two things have happened. The first, he says, is that, you know, we discovered so much about the world, about physical nature, and the people like Newton, you know, Huygens, Copernicus, you know, they Leibniz, they put it all together. They gave us nice ways of explaining the things we were contacting with this Renaissance, with the age of reason like that. Laws of optics, laws of gravity, laws of mechanics, calculus, they all helped us, you know. But then we came to the second level where we started discovering the microcosmic world. And all this new information was coming. But again, okay, Einstein, De Broglie, James Jeans, you know, Schrodinger, they helped us put it all together and get some order again. But he said, now, the same thing is happening. You know, because science is honest. Okay, pretty much. You can stretch it, but don't get caught. Yeah. So, okay, so we're discovering so many things, you know, which don't fit into the, you know, our classical mechanics or our modern, you know, the atomic system. He said it's like we call it, you know, scientific anomalies. Okay, so you put it over here, later on as we advance, we'll be able to explain it. You know? But he said, but the pile of scientific anomalies is getting so high, you know, it's just about ready to fall over. And people say, hey, you don't have you've got to have a big paradigm change. You know, a big paradigm change. So that's why I'm interested in the work you're doing of trying to bring Oriental paradigms in the perspective, you know, of Western science like that. And the second reason, he said, is because it appears there was never a Cartesian split in these systems. At the time of Descartes, you know, science and rational thought, investigation, empiricism went one way, and the university went that way. Other direction, as authority, tradition, intuition went the other way, and the church went that way. So there was this division, you know, the rational line, like the Cartesian split. And so therefore, somebody can become very powerful, but not be a good person, right? Not be a good person. Einstein said, science can tell us how things are, right? But it can't tell us how they should be, right? Science can give you a very, very nice airplane named the Enola Gay. You know this airplane?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. traveling across hundreds of miles of open water. How do you find where you're going? You know, okay, take you right to the right spot. You know, it was Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I think, which was the first to be blessed. Okay, Hiroshima. And there's flying and everything else. And you know, and science does all this. Science is so wonderful. And then, okay, I don't know, maybe 30 miles from the target, the captain turns control of the airplane over to the bombardier. He's actually flying the airplane. Okay, open the doors are open. Arm the instrument. Okay. The instrument is armed. 10, 9, 8, target locked on, 3, 2. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do what? I'm not going to push the button. Okay, we're going into a loop here. Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, the Quran. Page 44 it says. Yeah, science can tell us how things are, but it can't tell us how they should be. One person had to make that decision. You know, I'm going to push this button. And I think it was, 140,000 people, something like that, died, and so on. So that was his second reason, that it appears that the Oriental philosophies of nature have a very good perspective that we can take advantage of, like that. And also the second thing is that they have an integrated system where ethics and morality and physical power are connected. The more you know about nature, the better person you are. And the better person you are, the more control and power you get. So the Bhagavatam, presenting that, has this very nice perspective. The Phaedo then, and it's interesting, this broader perspective like that. But the Phaedo is the first thing we're approaching, and many people say, yes, it's very nice, because it's, you know, Socrates discusses, and Greek philosophy discusses many things. Cosmology is one of those, of course. Democritus and somebody else are the originators of the atomic idea. And but it says that in India was Canada, and Paramanuvad also describes the world as being made of little particles like that. But the description right away is that the Indian idea was pretty much more sophisticated than the idea of Democritus. And so then later, of course, this passes on. One idea is the world is made of atoms, the other idea is made of waves, you know, which in the Indian philosophy deals with these. You know. What was your method of investigation? Did they have super colliders? No, you just sit down and calm down and investigate your body. So many techniques, but you can control the prana, the mind, and you can investigate all these things. And that's what, again, I have faith in the superiority of Oriental science after seeing what karate people can do. Definitely they know things about how nature works, which Western science doesn't, you know, as a structure doesn't deal with like that. Okay, so they claim through the yoga systems you can investigate what is nature, what is matter to the most, you know, subtle level like that. But Socrates, of course, the Phaedo, he's especially dealing with this question about, you know, is the soul immortal or not, right? And what is the good life? Why should we live properly? And so it's a whole project which actually we're just starting to investigate. Stanford, I was looking at, you know, in Stanford, of course, there's some online lectures which are given here, which are very interesting. And the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, there's no article about the Phaedo, but there is like an article about Socrates, very nice. So we're starting to look at this again. And that's what Renaissance means, is that people haven't done this seriously for so long. It's fallen out of interest. But let's look back and see what the content is. What are the arguments that he gives? You know? In general, I'm starting to take my time. You know, I learned my lesson. At 65 years old, you got to kind of slow down like that. It's like, if you know that. You know. Until 25 years old, you can run on the field, kick the ball, scream and yell. Until 35, you can be on the side, you know, screaming at the players, dropping up and down, tearing your, you know, things up and down. Until 45, you can be a trainer, not even go to the game maybe. 55, you got to start like, you know, start sitting in the bleachers and seeing the stupid mistakes and this being, you know, okay, stupid mistake. Like that, you know. And then you become like an informal resource person. So I kind of realized that's more my role now. You know? And we have good philosophers at universities and stuff who want to kick the ball and, and argue these fine points, like that.